Hello and welcome to the Sexient Being Sessions. Today we are talking about sexual freedom, how to start releasing shame around your pleasure body, getting into exploring your pleasure more deeply, and owning this great adventure that is your sexual freedom. I'm Alix Pruett, a certified sex, love, and relationship coach with a BDSM and kink focus. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to transform their old patterns, pain, and beliefs so they can create thriving relationships that are deeply connected, playful, and fulfilling within themselves and with others. Today, I'm joined by the magnificent Rachelrose. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, my dear.
Yes, thank you. I'm Rachelrose. I'm a life coach with a master's degree in psychology that specializes in PTSD and trauma. I focus on helping women heal from abuse and thrive in all aspects of life. My mission is to empower women who have experienced the various forms of trauma to discover inner peace, cultivate love, and embrace happiness. Together, we embark on a transformative journey towards healing, resilience, and a fulfilling life. And hand in hand, we create an empowering path of growth and self discovery. On this path, we empower each other together, unlocking our true potential and embracing life, a life of fulfillment.
Beautiful. All right, so let's dive right in. So,
Yeah.
for me, this topic of sexual freedom comes up one because it is one of those big spaces that can be so limiting in our life because sexuality, sex in general, that sort of play, which is what I consider it, is a type of play with life, gets wrapped up in so much taboo, so many insecurities, so many fears and myths about what that is or has to be that it kind of gets us all clamped down in a box of what that can look like. And we forget that our bodies, while they can feel immense levels of pain, are also about receiving pleasure. That's
Mhm.
what those sensations are. They're the same neural pathways. And so the way I like to look at bodies now versus it being a pain body only, because that's a
Mhm.
lot of the time we actually pay attention to our body, is this
Well,
immaculate vessel of pleasure.
oh, yes.
I'm curious, when you think of sexual freedom, Rachel,
Mhm.
what comes up for you?
For me, a couple of things come up. Um, the first one that came up was in how I present myself as myself being a woman. And that isn't just in the bedroom.
Hmm.
It's also how I dress, how, what I choose to do with my body, like
Hello.
exercise, yoga. Um,
Hello.
Hi, can you mute your mic for a moment until Rachel is done speaking, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello.
Can you mute your mic for a moment until Rachel is done speaking, please?
Okay, baby. Do you like sex?
So this is a space of respectful calls and being able to talk openly about sexuality and sexual freedom.
Video call, normal call.
So I'm going to ask you to mute your mic one more time. If you're not able to do that, I'm going to have to remove your permission to be up on the call platform.
Why?
Thank you for your time.
I talk to sex.
hmm.
All right. Sorry about that interruption.
Yes, so it's a great example of the difficulties of sexual freedom.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, but what I was saying is one of the bigger aspects for me in my sexual freedoms um, come a lot in how I present myself to liberate myself from a lot of the construct of the world around us, how I present myself in the workplace, simply in how I dress or, what makeup I choose to wear. And, I feel a lot of people confuse sexual freedoms with only being in the bedroom. Um,
Yes.
and that's not entirely the case. I have gotten a lot of flack over my lifetime for how I dress.
Hmm.
And I find the most sexual freedom and liberation in dressing. I kind of like to think of myself like Dolly Parton.
I love
So
that.
Dolly Parton based her whole image off of a hooker or a woman of the night. I'm, not sure what the political correct word
I
would be
like I
nowadays.
like Lady of the Night. I find that very
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you. A lady of the night. And mine actually comes from Fran Drescher in The Nanny. As I remember growing up watching The Nanny and seeing how she dressed, and she was always, ridiculed and one ogled by men and kind of sexualized by men, and she never
Mhm.
let it, you know, change her style. She never, was like, "Oh, he just objectified me, so I need to cover up more." And then other
Mhm.
women would basically be calling her a tramp or trashy, and she would be like, "Okay, hold on," and scooch her skirt up just a little bit more. And I always just loved that because I felt that it was a way to express myself in my sexual freedoms and who I wanted to be through what I was wearing. And so I also I almost kind of think of it like an art form, is that like I get to express my sexual freedoms through painting on my face and choosing what costumes I want to wear for the day.
Yes.
And that's a really big one for me. And then the other thing that came to mind was in the bedroom. I in many I've been through a lot in my life, and why I've become the coach in the area that I am, is because I've been through a lot of the same abuse and traumas that the women that I help and work with have. And I have spent many years, as Alex is aware of, um, re-establishing my sexual freedom in the bedroom. And I've had a lot of sexual traumas happen in my life, and a lot of my sexual freedom has come in re-exploring those sexual acts in a safe space that allowed me to embrace sexual freedom without giving giving in to the traumas that are associated with that act.
Yeah.
So my biggest healing in my journey has actually come from liberating myself to sexual freedoms, both in how I present myself to the world and how I show up in the bedroom.
Yeah, and I think this is a beautiful spot to bring in. That's you commented on how your sexuality isn't just something that you see being behind closed doors in the bedroom, right? It's in the way you dress,
Mhm.
it's in the way you paint your face. So putting on makeup, whether that's like you decide you're going to step out of the house wearing like a full clown face
Yeah,
or
yeah,
even a nude face, right? Those
exactly.
are just the extreme examples.
Hmm.
But the important piece that brings it back to your own ownership is you're doing it for yourself,
Hmm.
not for anybody else's enjoyment, because it brings you pleasure,
Exactly.
right? And in that, for me, there is a piece that comes up very much so in consent, like the gentleman who was trying to join on our call and was not respecting another person's boundary or the call boundaries. These are rules that are laid out when you join a call is you wait until another person is done speaking, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
you respect that space and give them that time. He very well could have had his time to speak. He wasn't respecting those boundaries, so I let him know he was going to be asked to leave the call if he
Mhm.
couldn't respect those. And then I actually had to kick him off the call because he was not respecting those. And that boundary was already laid, right?
Mhm.
But in that, there's a piece for me around consent. So I personally have found I enjoy exhibitionism. It is a huge edge for me. That is where I am able to be in my sexual expression in front of other people.
Mhm.
One of those spaces that can come up is people are like, oh, I'm going to go have sex in public. I don't actually like that because a lot of the time when people do that, it'll be like at a park or
Mhm.
hanging off a balcony over a busy city street. And for me, that crosses my own values of consent
Oh, yeah.
because those other people who are potentially observing that scene are not consenting to that shared space
Mhm.
and being a part of that interaction. And you can't control that on all levels, right? But for me, that means I find appropriate spaces where that is consensual, like social swingers or sex clubs,
Mhm.
where these people walk into this establishment knowing that it is very likely they're going to see naked bodies and or sex.
Yeah.
And then I can play with my exhibitionist edge while knowing like I am being as safe with other people as
Mhm.
possible. And that's how I do my makeup. That is all for me. Like if somebody has
Mhm.
a problem with how I do my makeup, like it may cross some of their own personal boundaries. They don't have to wear their makeup the way I do. They
Mhm.
don't have to dress their bodies the way I do. As long as my genitalia and breasts are covered in those like social spaces out in the normal world, because sexuality can be so scary for so many people,
Mhm.
then for me, I am doing my due diligence while allowing myself to still be me. Because honestly, if I could, I'd just totally walk around naked all the time. I like the feel of air on my skin. It's nice.
Mhm.
But it's finding those balances and appropriate social settings,
Definitely.
right? Because also that appropriate social setting of an actual club that is set up for this also means I am much safer. They have rules laid out of you don't touch without asking. If somebody says no once, they only have to say it once.
Mhm.
And that means if, as a female, I am nude in a space, that no guy gets to come up and randomly grope me if they want, because that is a thing that happens as a female and can also lead to that feeling of huge lack of safety within our own bodies and our own expression.
Mhm.
It's that whole piece where there's the victim shaming around women who do dress in a more sexy or sensual way of, well, like, well, look at how she was dressed. She was asking for it.
Mm.
No one's ever asking to have their
No.
boundary crossed in that way.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's removing shame,
Mhm.
right? Making sure that there is actually the safety and consent with how and where that is being expressed.
Mhm.
Because ultimately you're helping keep yourself safe, you're helping keep others safe. And like that is respected. Like I personally don't I want to cause like least harm. I don't mind helping people push their edges, right?
Yeah.
But I don't need to be the person causing them mass amounts of trauma.
Yeah.
That is not my goal in life.
Yeah. I like that you brought up the accusation that is a common occurrence in people betraying the levels of consent when it comes to sex in, stating, oh, well, if they didn't dress like that. Yeah, that there was a art exhibit many years ago that framed the outfits of women who did not give consent to the people who forced themselves on them. And that was a very gut-wrenching exhibit, especially for me, not just because of my experience, but because there was a display, basically the whole thing was like, oh, it was because of what she was wearing. And there were a majority of pajamas, there was sweatpants, and there was a plethora, and it bothers me, so, oh, of little girls' dresses.
Mhm.
And the argument of what you're wearing is just so invalid and irksome to me that it makes me want to do it more because
Mhm.
I'm defiant that way. Um, and this might sound, interesting, for lack of a better term. Part of my sexual liberation and freedoms actually came from learning to defend myself
Mhm.
on a physical level. Education as well. Like I learned that having a certain level of intelligence helps me combat, but also feeling that I am able to protect myself in a unfortunate male dominated world also allowed me to feel more free and confident to express myself.
Mhm.
Simple things like carrying around pepper spray helped me feel confident in what I was wearing, who I was. Um, I used to allow myself to get out of shape out of fear of my sexual freedoms. The more beautiful my body was, the healthier it was. Even it's not even about beauty, just allowing myself to eat right and exercise so that I'm happy and
Mhm.
fit
Yeah.
terrified me to the point that I would get overweight so that less people would breach me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I actually found diving into more sexual play around specific areas that particularly traumatized me, that there's a lot of trauma there. I am a survivor of the Me Too movement, um, to not get into grotesque detail. Um, and for many years, I thought being abstinent and not allowing anyone near my body was liberation or me protecting myself and being free, only to find out later it was not that for me. I'm not saying it couldn't be for other people, that's not at all what I'm saying,
Mhm.
but it actually took going down the metaphorical rabbit hole and actually specifically doing specific sexual acts that were forced on me.
Mhm.
And that was a way to gain back sexual freedom for myself, in a way, get control back
Yeah.
so that I could have a partner in the future where I want to show them that love in the bedroom
Mhm.
without being pulled back to when it was forced on me.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
that yeah,
I think it's important that nobody actually has to go the extent of having
no,
any sort of sexual act forced on you,
right.
right? There are people who will try to force that on you because they're stuck in their own narratives.
Mhm.
They're stuck in their own desires and thinking that somebody outside of them is the only thing that can fulfill that. And I want to allow everyone the space to take a step back
Mhm.
from that
Mhm.
because that is a form of projection that can become very toxic. Again, like the gentleman who tried to interject earlier when I was asking for the space for you to finish talking. He's going to end up being a great example throughout this call. So I kind of
Right.
appreciate him for that. Um, but he kept trying to push for his question to be heard first of, do you like sex?
Mhm.
And within that space, like, I have no problem answering that question,
Mhm.
but like, wait for the space that is defined for you. Wait for that consensual
Mhm.
agreement versus trying to force it to happen right now when you want it. And if
Yes.
you need it to happen sooner and your partner is like, that's one, either not a boundary it's a hard limit. I don't want to cross it
Mhm.
at all. Or I need, let's say, 6 months before I can even get there. Let's say
Yeah.
they've never had sex and like they really need to have this foundation of trust and safety. There is nothing wrong with them needing to wait 6 months.
Mhm.
If that's something you really can't wait for yourself, then it's not your place to force them to want it too, right? Or
Mhm.
change their minds that they need to do that sooner. That means maybe you decide to step away from the relationship or interactions altogether.
Mhm.
And you can go find somebody else who would probably sleep with you that night, right? That's not that hard to find, at least in American society.
Yeah.
Um, but like I it's about consent because when we do not respect other people's body boundaries and especially around sexuality, it is a huge violation and will lock down a person's body in shame, in fear.
Mhm.
And to me, that's not okay. Like,
Mhm.
I want everybody to be able to have their sexual freedom. It doesn't mean I force it on anyone else. My
Mhm.
sexual freedom does not mean me taking away someone else's
Yes.
freedom of consent and their choice.
Mhm. I also want to emphasize that persuasion or manipulation in any way takes away all consent. If
Yes.
you have voiced no and they proceed to try and convince you to say yes, and then once you
Hmm.
have said yes, your yes is no longer valid.
Well, and again, no is a complete sentence. You
Yes.
don't ever actually have to explain.
Mhm. And I think, especially if it took me learning the hard way that manipulated consent is still forced sex.
Yes.
And that was a very hard pillow. That was a very
It can
hard
be a real
pill.
hard pillow to swallow too. Shit. I don't think I want to try swallowing a pillow. I mean, I've had my face buried in some, but that was also my choice.
But it was a very hard pill for me to swallow because I didn't want to accept
Hmm.
that I had been uh, forced upon.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to admit that because that felt like something that would break me.
Hmm.
And there were other instances where I was willing to admit that that was what happened because that is genuinely what happened. Lots of things that have happened to me have been both manipulated and just straight up forced.
Hmm.
And I was willing and perfectly fine with saying, yeah, that one was forced. But
Yeah.
this one was my boyfriend. We were together for a very
Yeah.
long time. He would never do that to me. No, he loves me. He wouldn't do that. And I never came to the realization until after, yeah, after the relationship had ended. And it still took me years to enter down a path of wanting to find that sexual freedom, even after admitting that that was the truth.
Hmm. Oh
And
yeah.
so,
No,
yeah.
that's it's gonna sound probably fairly harsh. Um, and trigger warning for anybody who has experienced sexual contact without their consent of a yes. I have been raped, and in situations of rape by coercion, I have very openly been raped by a partner when I was saying no.
Yeah.
and that act still proceeded. One of my biggest realizations for myself, and it's why one of my core values is so highly around taking full ownership of your actual yes and your actual no, and learning how to communicate with that in your body to learn where you're at, is because I found I was actually my own worst rapist. For all the times I said yes,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was actually a no because I wanted to avoid a conflict, I didn't want my partner to feel shame or mad or have their ego hurt because it was a no for me. And that was a really hard truth I had to look at within myself, of all the spaces I gave up my own no, my own body,
Mm-hmm.
to satiate and soothe another person, and I caused myself harm in those spaces.
Mm-hmm. Makes me think of Game of Thrones when Daenerys Targaryen first gets married off, I think in the first season, and her wedding night happens. And in a sense, many could argue that she consented
Mhm.
because she took off her own clothes, she bent over, she allowed him in, but she did it the entire time crying.
Yeah.
And in her situation, she didn't feel she had another choice. She needed his power to help rise her up.
Mhm.
And I've been in a relationship where I stayed in it because I needed that person in other ways, and I was willing to lie to myself. In a specific case, I had cancer, and I was not in a place where any family lived around me. I was still going to school, and this was my only support system present to me physically.
Mhm.
And so a lot of me would do similar things like that. Um, and it does completely gross me out that he was still willing to do it, even though I was in tears the entire time.
Yeah.
And he knew I didn't want to do it, but he had to have it. And if I didn't give it to him, I knew he would leave, and
Mhm.
I couldn't have that. And it actually was one of the reasons why I left in the first place. It came out of the blue. He said something, and I was like, "Well, then we should break up." And what they kind of those words kind of flew out of me,
Mhm.
and then I was like, "Oh my god, yes, that is exactly what I need, and that's what I want." And unfortunately, I did wait till I was recovering from my cancer to do that.
Mhm.
Um, and just simply leaving that person felt like sexual freedom,
Yeah.
and a very powerful and very difficult moment in my life. Very sure.
Well, and
And
it is because it's taking an ownership back
hmm
of your body,
hmm
right? So I
and
am, oh,
oh, sorry,
if you have a little bit more,
I was
then
just
go
gonna
ahead.
comment on what you said about being your own worst rapist.
Mhm.
The years coming or after that, I had to grapple with that reality,
Yeah.
and that almost makes it harder, I guess, because both situations have come about in my life, and it's so much easier for me to move on and let go of the instances where it was singled and I had no consent whatsoever, complete rape, versus manipulated consent, which I which I basically call manipulated rape.
I also do want to be clear, because there was a conversation I had with an ex partner where they were telling me that one of the instances where I had experienced rape by coercion, which was me constantly saying no and the guy continuing to push. And finally I was like, I'm really drunk. I don't want to deal with this. Like this will make him shut up.
Mhm.
Right. And I said
Mhm.
yes. But in that instance, this ex-partner of mine did not believe me. He's like, "Oh, you just regret that you did
Mm.
that." And I was like, "Yes, I regret that I did that to myself. It also did not make his action okay."
Yes.
Um, but in that, part of his defense was, "Well, do you know how many people I've had sex with that I didn't want to have sex with?" And I was like, no, I did not know that, right?" But
Mhm.
in that, why did you have sex with them if you didn't want to have sex with them? Again, that it falls back to that same realm. And this is just to clarify that this happens for men as well as women. There can
Mhm.
be a lot more stigma around, oh, my body has an erection for a guy. This means I'm aroused and I need to take that action, even if there's an alignment in your heart or your mind saying, I don't want this thing,
Mhm.
right? And that can become the focus of, well, I ended up sleeping with people I didn't want to sleep with because part of my body, part of my system told me I was aroused.
Mhm.
It's also very much so like there's a bunch of like rap songs, but then also a website, and I believe we've talked about it before, where it's women holding up a sign of the things their rapist said to them.
Mhm.
And the rap songs actually reflect the same thing, but that being the thing that told these men that the woman wanted it, even though her words were no.
Yeah.
And that's that she was wet.
Mhm.
And just because pussy says yes, just because cock says yes, does not mean the rest of your system is a yes. So the best way to actually gauge that is by what the person is verbally communicating. Sadly, sometimes people will still not know how to listen to those other signals, right, of the no, so they will say yes. There are also things that can show up very well in the body language to tell you this isn't actually yes for the person. And if you get the sense that it is a no within your own body or what you're picking up from your partner, maybe take a step back and slow down. Because
Yeah.
to me, those are very intimate shared spaces. And it is so much more pleasurable and so much easier to drop into that full ecstasy of the experience with a person when it is a full yes for both.
Mhm. Makes me think of the like response of like it doesn't mean she doesn't want to pursue you like further. My like the words are literally like I would love to. I just don't think I'm ready yet. She bodily is feeling the lust, but she personally on the inside and her psyche is not ready. And I have said those words and I remember laughing at their response because all they heard was, but I want to.
Mhm.
And I started laughing and I was like, yeah, did you hear the next part where I said I wasn't ready? And then they got upset. And in many instances, I did bend and do it. But nowadays, I would just be like, no, I'm not ready. You want to continue dating for a little bit longer before I'm ready?
Mhm.
That's up to you. Tell me now. Because I'm telling you, yes, I am attracted to you sexually and I'd love to have some sexual play with you. But right this second, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And that's a communication. I have had men walk away. And I was okay with that because I was not looking for a one night stand. There are many
Yeah.
times that I was, and that's totally fine. But in those instances, I was not. And thankfully, usually it was, yeah, they got upset because they felt rejection. And
Yeah.
so they were upset and angry and yelling at me. And I had to remind myself of my boundaries, everything that I've learned as a trauma coach, to not bend anymore because it's triggering for me to be yelled at.
Hmm.
And it's very easy to just be like, okay, let me alleviate all of this tension by just spreading my legs.
Yeah. All
But
right.
that's
So
not, yeah.
I want to invite Rayan up. They've been waiting for a bit,
Oh,
very
yeah.
patiently, and I appreciate that. Um, so I please correct me on pronunciation if I'm not getting it right. But Rayan, I am curious before you ask whatever question you have, what does sexual freedom mean to you?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Rose, uh, to getting me invited here. I just want to tell you that I am living in Asia. It is Southeast country. It's also a poor country. Uh, there are many norms and values in this society. Open sex is prohibited here. Even if we are Even I am getting older. I am 25 years old, but uh, in our society they can't accept it if I do sex with girl in college or anywhere. Only I can do sex if I do marriage. So
Hmm.
exactly how can I say that it is freedom? But it's when I marry, I can do sex. Without marry, I can do nothing with girl. So sexual freedom is just how can I say? It's just natural. We can bind it by any rules and regulation. Yeah, even our UN declaration, human rights. If you dominate it, you can dominate the human rights. I think
Hmm.
that's my English is not so well, so I can't express you what I'm trying to say. But I please.
Well, and please feel free to correct me if I get any of this wrong. Um, it sounds like, based on the country you're living in Asia, that there is a lot wrapped up around like you can only have sex during marriage. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it doesn't give you the space to explore your sexuality with a partner until you step into that container of marriage.
No, without marriage, we can do nothing. It is totally prohibited. If the societies people show you to do like this, when you do sex, then they will punish you.
Yeah.
Like they, yeah.
Yeah, and that is sadly a reality that exists around our world still, right? That's America has a lot of taboo wrapped up around sex and sexuality. There are other countries that are more open and accepting to that. There are other ones that are still a lot more shut down. Um, but it's finding ways to be able to connect with that in your life and in the world you're living in to take back some of that ownership. And I'm going to tell you right now, sexual freedom, while like we tend to think of sex as something that has to happen with a partner, doesn't actually have to take place with a partner, right? It's fun to take that adventure with another person, but ultimately our sexual freedom starts within our own body and our own being. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? So there's a lot you can end up doing as far as different pleasure practices in tapping into those present moment sensations, learning how to seduce your own body. That can be really helpful. So when you do step into this container of relationship, and in your country, marriage, to where you can explore your sexuality with a partner, then you already have developed this really amazing foundation within your own being. That makes it easier to then share it with another person versus feeling like the only place you can get it is from another person.
Yeah, it's just an idea
And
to.
what do you mean it's just the idea?
Yeah, you just say, if I tell people to make it, it's a need to mix opinion about this, common
Mhm.
opinion we need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's harder when especially it's the like cultural view that there's something really unsafe about sex or sex outside of marriage. Um, Even that like monogamy is the only right form of relationships, because that is a very strong view that can be held across many nations. But in that it's taking back the ownership of where you do have control, which is within your own being, because we don't really have control of anything else outside of us. We can start enacting change though.
Yeah, we should change it to create a idea, and
Hmm.
uh, for that country their sex is forbidden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had somebody from, I believe it was India, reach out to me very shortly after I finished my initial training program, which she says that a lot of her work is based in Tantra, which stems from Hindu cultures, as far as my understanding. Her training was actually more in what's called Neo Tantra, which is more of a westernized view of Tantra and more directly involves sexuality. But it was interesting having a conversation with this man because he was actually trying to kind of start a Tantra school in India. And there was so much shame around even bringing these concepts forward, even though that was one of the countries of origin for where these concepts even stemmed from. And like him and I had a whole conversation around it because I was just kind of mind blown that, like, oh, this is the birthplace of these sorts of practices. And you guys are so boxed in around being able to actually like have that open expression and embodiment.
Yeah, I got it. I understand.
Yeah. So what is one little way that you could see taking for yourself, being able to take your ownership of your sexual freedom back, right? And remember, the thing we have control over is not the things outside of us, but within ourselves. Is there any little thing you can think of that you could do to kind of hold that ownership for yourself?
I just in this conversation room, I just thinking that we need to aware people like who are my mate, classmate, or my relatives like friends.
Hmm.
We I need to talk with them about that slowly. Maybe it will work slowly because this is a taboo thing, so it will
Yeah,
work slowly.
yeah,
Okay, but one day it will be changed, I think.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
those little, it's the little like 1 degree shifts, right? We make from that path we were on that like even in a couple weeks or a couple months, you can look back and be like, oh my God, I've come so much further from where I was and where I would have been going.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. It's starting to open up those conversation spaces, especially around topics that are scary for people. That is honestly one of the reasons I invited Rachelrose to help me create the space of the Sexient beings, is to start bringing those uncomfortable conversations forward because it is something that people are experiencing, but don't necessarily have the resources or the community to be able to talk with and realize they're not alone in their experience, right? So, do you have anything else before I start bringing Rachelrose back into the conversation?
No, no, no. I can. Yeah, yeah. It's enough for me. I need to work slowly. Okay. I
Yeah,
will. Yeah.
yeah,
Just
beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
and it is
talking
okay to
restlessly.
slow down.
How
Beautiful. Thank
no?
you so much.
You do you think I am still 25 years old, but I do nothing with gold. It's totally upsetting me. I just not only me, but also many of my friends
Hmm.
are watching porn like that. Masturbate. They masturbate to satisfy self.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's but they can but they could do sex. It's because it's too difficult. That's
Yeah.
why we watched porn in a secret place. uh, that's it, we practicing sex before
Hmm.
marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I just speak you all things you truly, frankly, I say it.
Yeah. And I wish you all the best in your journeys moving forward. Rachelrose, do you have any insights or anything you'd like to add?
Um, I really loved your, when Ryan, when you said that you want to communicate. And I think that is a really good step to help release a lot of the frustration that you're feeling. It's definitely going to be a difficult conversation. And like you said, take it slowly. But I think that it's a very beautiful and healthy realization to come to, that you want to talk to your family or your friends about these things, um, to help work through the frustrations that are coming out, so that when you do choose to have it, however you choose to go about it, it doesn't come from a negative space that, makes you feel more shame or more frustration.
Yeah, but it's a little bit same because we did not so practice like like Western American British society. So but I will try to my best, because I need a platform to make if I want to first, I will try to find a platform. If I did not find, then I will make it by myself with my circles people.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. I do want to get into talking about like a little bit more of some of those steps people can start taking for taking back that ownership. We talked about that a little bit, right? Ryan's talking about starting conversations that may be uncomfortable, starting to build communities so those conversations can happen with where
Mhm.
he's located in the world, and like letting other people know that this is something acceptable and understandable. right? It is something worthy of love and
Yeah.
exploration. Um, but also the ownership, like we talked about with the female body, of you're dressing for yourself, you're wearing makeup for yourself.
Hmm.
Another piece we kind of touched on in the conversation with Ryan is getting into your own pleasure practice. Because I know in my journey, there was a point in time where it was actually a pleasure practice through the training program I went through. I had this huge realization that I was going into like my masturbation practice, not looking at it like a pleasure practice, but going in to hit the end goal and get the fuck out.
Hmm.
Um, so I was literally treating my own body and my own pleasure like a one night stand. And after that point, I was like, fuck this. I'm going to start like romancing the shit out of myself before I go into that space. Maybe it means I light myself candles. Maybe it means like I feed myself a delicious meal or take myself on some other adventure or journey or a hot bath. Like those are going to look different for different people, but it's
Hmm.
setting that space of creating the full yes, not just I want to reach the end goal. That this experience is about an exploration of my body and what feels delicious
Hmm.
in that moment, not just that I want to hit an orgasm. Sometimes I also just want to hit an orgasm or climax, right? And be done. And
Hmm.
that's okay too, but it's making a conscious choice for that. And that
Yeah.
I can also just deep dive into like running my hands through my hair, not just touching the erogenous zones, the genitals, the breasts, or the ass, touching all the parts of my body because your full body is a pleasure body. Every single part of your body has the ability to feel pleasure, but every area is going to be a little bit different for the pleasure or like the pressure or the type of sensation it enjoys.
Yeah.
So I can experience all those orgasmic waves of pleasure without ever having to have another person there. When I do decide to invite somebody into that space with me, it's not something they have to fulfill. Again, it becomes this adventure and an exploration of, ooh, what does this other person enjoy receiving? And that can start out very well with the conversation. I recommend it because there's probably areas they don't like having touched or don't like having touched in certain ways.
Hmm.
And stepping away from the assumption that just because you like something, somebody else is going to like it, or that because your other partner or partners have liked this one thing, that the new person is also going to like it. Let's get away from that.
Hmm.
Everyone's pleasure body is different for what they enjoy.
And it's also good to have that conversation with yourself. I know in my
Yes.
journey, I I couldn't even touch myself for years. The idea for me was around shame and thinking that it made me, for lack of a better term, a whore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would tell myself. I would be shaming myself to even pleasure myself. And if I were to seek out another person, it would just be like, oh, I'm this, I'm a tramp. And so I couldn't even, enter into any form of sexual activity within myself. I had a hard time dressing, provocatively, putting on makeup. And so having that conversation with yourself is important because you allow yourself to feel all of those feelings and then forgive yourself, accept, and start the letting go process of where that frustration was, started from, how it was created, how it built over time to become what it is now. And it doesn't mean that what you're telling yourself, like, I am not a whore. but I was telling myself that I was, and it kept me from certain sexual freedoms within myself.
I'm gonna say if you want to embody the identity of a whore, then by all means do it, right?
That's perfect
Just
too. Yeah.
allow yourself to be like a
Mhm.
conscious whore that like this is the identity I want to play with,
Mhm.
and there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's removing shame that can get so stigmatized with certain words. To me, there are no good words or bad words. It's
None.
the context we apply to them
Mhm.
that makes the difference.
Yes, I love that so much. I completely agree. And I'm glad that you put emphasis on that because there is nothing wrong with that word. It is what I was placing into it.
Yeah. Well, and there's a whole like set of practices around playing with the sacred prostitute, which is phenomenal for like helping break out of those shames. I mean, even for women, there's a lot of shame around certain words like whore, slut, right? Guys
Mhm.
get more of the opposite where they're at least in American society where they're like propped up for having a whole bunch of partners, but women receive the shame side of it.
Mhm.
So it's taking back ownership, right? It's taking I
Yeah.
love that guys tend I mean women will try to use it too, but try to use pussy as a form of
Ins
shame and discrimination. And I will literally be like look at them and be like, "One, I am a pussy owner. I'm gonna tell you that pussy is strong as fuck. Like
Mhm.
pussy can take a beating. You can push
Mhm.
a whole fucking human life out of that thing and it goes back. It retakes its
Yeah.
form, right? And I was like, but you flick a ball sack and it'll put a guy on his knees. So would you rather be a pussy or a set of testicles? Because right now I'd rather be a pussy.
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I've had some guys not like that so much.
Oh, of
It
course.
doesn't make it less true.
Not at all.
Um, but yeah,
And
if
it
you,
sorry.
oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna emphasize that it doesn't have to matter, or I guess let me rephrase that. It's really not relevant if, like in my case, I have fully embodied the word cunt.
Mhm.
And that is like I have it tattooed on my finger because someone paid me a compliment and called me an intellectual cunt. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. Like I've never been so complimented in my life. But my sister, if I use the word cunt in front of her, she gets very triggered and very upset.
Mhm.
And she's just like, you can't use that word. That's a bad word. And I'm like, for you. And that's okay. And I won't use it around you. And that I'm willing to do for her because I understand that that's not a good word for her.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean I'm going to stop using it in my life or take that she doesn't think it's a good word and she says it's a bad word. I'm not going to put that onto myself and be like, oh, it's a bad word. I can't use it.
Yeah.
So I guess my point there would be allow yourself to find your own truths within your sexual freedoms, regardless of the people around you. And in some cases, like what we talked about today in cultural settings, figuring out what it is for you and how you can make that work with the settings that you're, the environment and the culture that you're around.
Mhm.
Finding your own truth within that can help alleviate a lot of that frustration and shame that you feel. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to betray your culture either.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's huge, and that's I love that Ryan joined us on this call because, like, Rachel Rose and I are both very involved in the society in the United States, and there are
Mm-hmm.
many forms that sexual culture takes,
Mm-hmm.
right? I remember being in high school and hearing about how, like, either Canada or in Britain somewhere, they had naked news or, like, naked weather people, right? And, like, people were just flabbergasted in the United States that this was something allowed somewhere else in the world. And it's the body doesn't have to just be a sexual object either.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, I worked in massage for about 6.5 years, and I can see, I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of naked bodies.
Mhm.
I've had my hands at least on hundreds of naked bodies. It doesn't have to make it sexual. There
Mhm.
can still be immense pleasure in that, right? Like, I was giving massage. I also probably caused a lot of discomfort and pain for those people working on tight muscles,
Mhm.
right? But in that, like, it doesn't have to be about, again, this like end goal. It's about the experience. It's about that present moment pleasure and relaxation of the body into the experience rather than the contraction and holding that happens when we start wrapping shame around these identities and around what our body is.
Mhm. I completely agree.
So I do think it would be fun. I don't know how much longer you have, Rachelrose.
I
Um,
unfortunately do have to get going. I've got a doctor's appointment today.
okay. Well, I will let you go. Thank you again for joining us. For whoever is here, if you want to stay around, I'm going to just do a quick, like, 5, maybe 10-minute, like, guided practice
Beautiful.
on helping connect with your pleasure body, like, in this moment,
Mhm.
so you can start moving forward with that exploration more in your own life. I like giving practical tools that people can take forward and actually experience versus just getting all the information thrown at them from the very logical mind side.
I love that. I wish I could stick around. You guys definitely should. I know for firsthand experience that this will be great.
All right. Thank you, Rachelrose, and we'll see you next week.
See you all next week. Bye.
All right. So, whoever is still on the call or listening in the future, the thing I want to invite you into is, if you are in a safe environment that you have the capability to do this, go ahead and close your eyes or soften your gaze. And that softened gaze is you're looking at a certain point, but it's not a
Are you
hard focus.
leaving, Alex?
I will in a few minutes. I'm going to lead a little bit of a guided practice.
Okay. So you have any organization?
Do I have an organization?
Yeah.
I have websites and stuff, and I'll actually talk about that before I close out completely. Okay?
Okay. I give you follow. I will follow you
Yeah,
here.
beautiful.
Yeah. I think we need to connected for anything for help
Yeah,
about this. Yeah. So I follow you.
yeah, beautiful. And I invite anyone to follow. I release a lot of free content, not just including this call, but over TikTok, FetLife, Instagram, and Facebook. And then this call specifically gets posted on YouTube as well, so that other people who were not able to join for the live can get this information as well. A lot of this space is about creating those spaces of conversation so people can start diving into their own experiences.
Okay. So what is the name of this YouTube channel you using?
So the YouTube channel is at Sexient Beings. So it's the name of the Clubhouse group. But you should
Sexist.
Sexient, Sexient.
Oh, sexist beings. Yeah. I got
Yeah,
it.
sexient beings. So sort of like sentient beings, but sexient.
Yeah.
And if you go to my profile on Clubhouse, there is a link on there that has all my social media links on it as well. Same with a
Okay.
email list that is aimed more at men called the Sovereign Dom email list. Another one called the Sexient Beings email list.
Okay. Yeah, I will find.
All right, I would like to get into this practice before I need to hop off, though, if you don't mind muting your mic. Did you have any other questions real quick?
Oh, no. Can I ask you something personal?
I mean, you can ask. I may or may not answer. We'll see.
Okay, okay. How long have you been working these activities about sexual freedom?
So sex, love, and relationship coach for 3 years. I have
Okay.
personally been deep diving in the realms of human behavior, uh, relationship dynamics, and sexuality for 6 years, very extensively. I have probably well overdone getting a master's or doctorate, maybe by like
Oh,
2 or 3 times over by the amount of personal research and studying I have done, having conversations, taking courses, all the many things. So
okay. Yeah, you have a good knowledge for this, I think. So,
yes, also highly trauma informed because I realize how much of those narratives that come up for people are linked to their own traumas, the things that keep them stuck in the proverbial box of their full authentic expression.
yeah. So you, how old are you?
I am 39. I just had my birthday.
Oh, 39. Yeah, thank you. No, I have
Yep.
I have no question. Yeah, yes. Okay. Keep going.
All right. Thank you again for joining us. I am going to ask you to mute your mic so I can do the little bit of a guided practice, and then I will close out the rest of this session for today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alex.
Yes. Thank you for joining us.
Okay. Have a nice day.
You too. All right. So we'll take a step back again. I'm going to invite you into that space of closing your eyes or softening the focus of your gaze. You can also imagine that there's like little hammocks behind your eyeballs so that they can kind of release some of the hard focus we can build throughout a day, and that those are just there to hold and support them. I invite you to take a couple deep breaths down, like you can breathe all the way into the floor of your belly, all the way down to your pelvic floor. And just focus on the sensation of the breath moving into your body, filling your chest and your lower abdomen. And notice the sensations as you exhale of your breath moving back up and out of your body through your throat and out your nose and or mouth. And take a couple more deep breaths. Now I'm going to invite you into starting to explore your pleasure body. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your hands, if those feel safe. Again, you can, if it doesn't feel safe for some reason, then you can imagine that your hands are touching yourself as well. Everyone has their limits on what feels safe in their body. There is no judgments, no shame around any of this. It is just an exploration. And first off, we're going to start by just gently running your hands through your hair, along your scalp, going from around the temples, up above the back of the ears, and down to the base of the neck, over the top of the skull. If you're noticing that you like the light sensation, you can continue to do that. If you're noticing you have a desire for more depth in the sensation, you can add more pressure. If you have longer hair, you can also give your hair a little tug and see how that feels, and if you like it. If you don't like it, then you now have a new piece of information about the way your head and your scalp enjoys being touched. Now, I'm going to invite you to just gently place your fingertips together at the center of your forehead and lightly stroke down your cheeks, down the side of your face, and under your jawline. Then bring your hands back up and do the same across the bridge of your nose, down the forward part of your cheeks, next to the sides of your nose, and grazing over your lips, and then down to your chin. And just notice, are there areas that feel pleasurable in this? Are there areas that you don't like the sensation as much? And we're just noticing. You can move your hands and fingers across the sides of your neck to your collarbones, sweeping those out from the center of your collarbones to your shoulders. And just notice, do you like lighter sensation? Do you like the heavier sensation? You can tap your fingers along this area to see what sorts of sensation you enjoy. This is all about your pleasure. Now bring your hands and fingers down your upper arms, across your forearms, allowing your hands to meet and brush across one another. Again, if you're finding you like deeper pressure, feel free to use deeper pressure. I always find it valuable to start out slower, more gentle, and then moving into deeper pressure. I apply a lot of concepts that I've learned in massage for working with bodies, and there you're going to start out slower to move deeper. Now I invite you again, we're going to go down from the top of the shoulders, down the arms, but you're just gently going to pat and notice that sensation as it moves down your body. Notice the areas you enjoy, the areas you don't enjoy. Now we're going to take your hands, place them again under your collarbone, and move down the front of your body. Move them over your chest, over your breast. If you find that you enjoy the sensation in your chest or your breast, you can move your hands in circles around the nipple, and you can alternate the direction that goes in to see if there's something that you enjoy more. You can then move your hands down onto your abdomen, and I do recommend when you are applying any sort of pressure or stimulation to the abdomen, we're going to flow with the direction that our bowels process food through them. And that's in a clockwise motion. So if your belly was the front of a clock, you would be moving down the left side from left to right on your body, across the bottom. On the right side from bottom to top, and on the top from right to left. And this just helps make sure you are going with your body's natural flow. This can also help promote relaxation of the tissues around the gut as well, and the movement of food and the digestive process. Now I invite you to run your hands down the sides of your torso. So over the ribs, down along the sides of your stomach to your hips. And just notice how those sensations feel. You can also bring in little light slaps, or sometimes I will actually do a light fist and kind of do what's called a wrapping motion down my body, which is kind of like a little bit of a rhythmic beating. You can also do this lightly. The biggest concern here is in the area where you do not have ribs. Do not do deep pressure because there's not the body protection there to guard against or to guard your organs internally. Now I invite you to explore your buttocks. So those nice, delicious lumps that you tend to sit on when you're sitting, right? Just feel that area. Apply sensation, running your fingertips. The buttocks has a lot of muscle meat to it, so you can give yourself a firmer grab here without having to be concerned about causing damage. You can even give yourself like a nice little slap and see how that feels. Again, if it's something you don't enjoy, you now have a new piece of information about what your body enjoys. If it's something you do enjoy, again, you now have a new piece of information about what your pleasure body enjoys. And we're going to move down further. We're now going to move into your thighs. So you can explore the outside of your thighs. Notice, do you like the lighter sensation? Do you prefer more of a deep sensation as you move your hands across this area? Touch down the front of your thighs. Same thing, noticing for what you like in sensation. Do you like a variation where you're switching back and forth between kind of that gentle tickle and a firm grasp? You can do the same thing on the inside of your thighs and the back of your thighs. Just explore and see what feels good for you. Now I invite you to explore your right calf and shin. So the shin is the front of the lower leg, the calf is the back. Run your hands over this area and see what feels good. Again, this is an area with, especially on the calf, that has meatier tissue, so it is safer to do firm grasps or that wrapping or little slaps on the area as well. And then you can move down to the top of your right foot. Exploring your toes. Exploring the areas around your ankle. Moving to the bottom of the foot, the sole of the foot, where your body meets the earth. And finally, we're going to move to the left shin and calf. Just exploring, noticing what sensations you enjoy or don't enjoy, or maybe you love or hate them all. There's no rights or wrongs for what you find pleasurable in your body. Now to the top of the foot on the left side. Exploring the area around the ankle. Wrapping down to the bottom of the left foot. Exploring the ball of your foot, the area that you put pressure on if you're only standing on your toes, the arch of your foot, each toe, and the heel of your left foot. Now I invite you to come back to a resting position. You can rest your hands, one on your low belly, one on your heart, or just in a relaxed position. And take a moment and notice how you feel in your body with just having had this experience. Notice for any sensations. That can be the feeling of warmth, cold, heat, tingling, prickling, bubbling, buzzing. It can be noticing that there are areas that feel more relaxed or areas that feel tense. Again, there's no rights or wrongs. This is just a space of noticing. And if you have not enjoyed a pleasure practice before, you have now completed your first one. And I want to congratulate you deeply, because for me, being willing and able to explore our bodies and the pleasure we can receive there is huge. If you want more guidance in these areas, you are more than welcome to reach out to me. You can find my social links under my link tree, which is under the About section on YouTube. Here on Clubhouse, it's under my profile for Alix Pruett. You're always welcome to join the calls here on Clubhouse for the live. If you're not able to catch them, they will be on YouTube at the Sexient Beings. Again, all of the social media links are under my link tree through my profiles. If you want more direct guidance around exploring your sexual freedom, your sexual body, your ownership and empowerment of your sexual being, then feel free to reach out and book a discovery call. It's a free 1-hour experience where we will talk about what you have coming up, what you want to move towards, and figuring out what your next best steps are for you. Next week, we will be rejoining here and talking about the topic of fracture, the impact of trauma. And that will be a phenomenal call, in my opinion, because it's taking this lens of seeing where we have been fractured within ourselves and how we can start coming back to wholeness. You can also reach out to Rachelrose via her social media links. She does have a Facebook group, And until next time, it was wonderful to be here with all of you. And thank you for those who joined us on our call. Have a great day.